we have all been on the receiving end of James Wagstaff's scrutiny and criticism as he analyzed our speeches and pointed out all of our faults. Tonight, we relish in the opportunity to probe into Mr. Wagstaff's own eccentricities. Although Mr. Wagstaff stated in his book that he became a lawyer because he failed organic chemistry, this is simply not true. The truth is, Mr. Wagstaff became a lawyer because that was the only occupation that could provide him with the two things that he needed most. A line of work where he could hear his own voice all of the time, and a job where he could accumulate the funds required to support both himself and his ego. We may be from the crotch generation, my fellow romancers of the room, but our friend Mr. Wagstaff, he's from the telegraph generation. Evidently, he is well aware of his old age. As one of his favorite quotes is, "I grow old, I grow old." I got that off his Facebook, by the way. All I can say is, well done, Sherlock. Those degrees from Stanford and UCH at Haskins College of the Law are self-evident in your powers of self-analysis. James is as old as sawdust, literally. He eats a bowl of cashew cereal every morning, which, according to our very perceptive professor, tastes like a bowl of sawdust. Well, as the saying goes, you are what you eat, Mr. Wagstaff. Now, James has consecutively been selected as one of the super lawyers, those ranked in the top 5% of California since 2007. His accolades are as consistent as the anecdotes he tells us so repetitively. In our breakout sessions, Mr. Wagstaff spoke about fluidity of movement and flow. Well, sir, I certainly noticed that exceedingly fast flow of words spewing forth from your mouth. Our Jim, our jaws in motion, as he calls himself, speaks faster than Bone Thugs and Harmony raps. What makes it better is that he also makes gestures. Gestures. Rumor has it, James Wagstaff only gives A's to students who develop shoulder problems throughout the However, in all honesty, this class has been my favorite of this summer quarter, and it's among the best that I've ever taken. The skills that Mr. Wagstaff have imbued in us will accompany us for the rest of our lives. Hopefully, Jim's voice will not.
Thanks, Mark. Buckle your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen, because I now have the pleasure of introducing my own roommate, Omar.
Hey.
When Crafton put up the list of our role tonight, I was excited. But when I was told I had to root Bruce, I was confused. Who is Bruce? I don't ever remember a name called Bruce ever coming up that fast. I went back to the dorms and decided to do some research. I powered up my laptop, went to Google, and put in the variations of Stanford, public speaking, romancing the room, and Bruce. Nothing came up. I then went to the Stanford directory and put in Bruce. Over 50 names came up, with none of them having anything to do with public speaking. I was in a dilemma. I had to roast someone I didn't even know existed. The next day I went down to the cafeteria. I saw one of my fellow classmates and asked him, "Oh, so what are you doing tonight? What are you doing on Thursday night?" He said, "Oh, I'm roasting Jim. What about you?" I said, with a bit of uncertainty, I said, I think I'm roasting Bruce." He responded, "Oh, that's going to be kind of hard. I don't know much about Mr. Bean." Suddenly emotions started rushing in. First, stupidity and embarrassment. Then came amazement. I had realized I did not know anything about Mr. Bean. I thought about it for a second. I didn't know that he was an extremely accomplished real estate agent and fundraiser, but that information was constantly being restated the entire term. I also knew that he was unfortunately trapped in his dad. But I really had to think about it, and I realized there were a few things I didn't notice throughout this term. I noticed that he was completely oblivious to modern teenage terminology. When listening to some impromptu speeches, he spent a good 2 minutes trying to understand what jeggings were. Not to mention his lack of knowledge in modern technology. Other than setting up PowerPoints, I feel like basic internet usage, such as navigating Facebook, would be harder for him than performing brain surgery and juggling flaming knives with his feet. I've also observed upon careful inspection that Bruce is the king of sidekicks. He is almost an extension on Jim. Yet ironically, during his one speech, his one lecture about fundraising this term, he almost followed none of Jim's advice. I noted that he also sits at the very back row of the lecture hall and stays quiet the entire time, stroking his beard and playing with his glasses. With an intense look only corny movie villains have. Sometimes I wonder what's behind that beard and glasses of his. I believe that similar to an iceberg, only 1/10 of Bruce's beard can be seen on the surface of his face. If he even has a face. My hypothesis about our very own Mr. Bean is that behind his beard is yet another beard. And behind that beard is a fist. It is from this hypothesis that I've come to the conclusion that Bruce Bean is none other than Chuck Norris. It is said that Chuck Norris's beard is barbed wire soaked in ox blood and held together by the souls of mortals, and that Chuck Norris doesn't have a beard on his face, but his beard has a face. I think we can all gather here today on this special night to safely say the same can be said about Bruce Bean's beard. Thank you.
Even though Omar's prior speeches about preparing hookah, even though he condones smoking, he does not want people to be smoking, and about mysterious ice cream stealing goats really entertained me. I'd have to say this was one of my favorites. I've realized that Omar is a very quiet kid, but what he has to say is usually hilarious. And sometimes I wonder how he manages to even keep a straight face while saying that Bruce Bean is in fact Chuck Norris. I don't know how he did that. But next to the podium, I want to welcome Ben Cowman, who at one point in time split an apple with his bare hands and has been named to be Superman.
Now, we've been taught in this class that visual aids are always a possibility, and I saw this, and I made a little PowerPoint, and I figured why not, so you gotta bear with me while I put it together. Wonderful dinner, by the way. And if you have your book with you, as Rob suggested we all should, you might want to turn to page 120. I refer you to page 120 because it is the chapter on roasts. So we can, I'm here to roast Kraft and Bean, by the way, in case you haven't realized. And I refer you to the last paragraph. The comments are in the form of good-natured ribbing to emphasize that the speech is given in good fun. Always go to the person you are roasting. Who, I might add, absolutely must be in the room. So this is a TA for a class who's telling me that I can't roast someone unless they're in the room. Let me